Now it's time for Spot on Sports. Here's your hosts, Mike Trez and Mike Cadone.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spot on Sports, New York's premier sports talk show. We talk sports, all New York sports, and nothing but sports. My name is Mike Trez. The great Michael Anthony's driving the train for us again tonight. We've got another great show for you tonight. Plenty of NFL talk, playoffs, and also a big issue going on off the field right now that we're going to dig into. Plenty of hockey later with Johnny Sticks. We've got Declan coming up in just a few minutes. Before we get to any of that, let me say hi to my co-host, the coach, Mike Cadone.
Trez, always a pleasure to be here and excited once again. You know, it's been 2 weeks. The number 2 is very prominent in today, obviously. We've got 2 teams left in the NFL, which we're going to dive into, as you mentioned. So lots of good stuff to get to tonight.
Yeah, and you know, what's strange about this, Mike, this is kind of, to you and me, reminiscent of our very first show that we did together. We were very excited to talk about Met offseason acquisitions, NFL playoffs, Knicks, other things. And all of a sudden, on our way into the studio, the Jared Porter story with the Mets kind of caught us off guard and forced our hand into really talking about it. Similarly, we have a situation going on right now with former Dolphins coach Brian Flores, for those who haven't heard about it yet, is now suing the Dolphins and the Broncos and the New York Giants and, bigger picture, the NFL for racial discrimination. He was interviewed by the Giants. He was one of the final 2, at least supposedly, from their viewpoint, did not get the job, and now has brought about this suit. So, you know what we'll do, Mike? We'll save the part of it that pertains directly to the Giants. We'll shelve that for just a couple minutes till we get Declan on. And
Sure.
You and I will dig into the part of it that pertains to the Dolphins, the Broncos, and the NFL. So let's start there.
Absolutely. You know, as you mentioned, it's a shame that we kind of have to go to this type of story. But listen, it's bigger than New York. It's bigger than just the NFL. Obviously, this is something that has major ramifications. And as we enter the month of February, especially, which is Black History Month, you know, I can tell you where I teach, you know, it's a heavy African-American community. We're very involved in that and very proud of it. So, you know, the timing is very pertinent on many levels. Taking the Giants out of it, as you mentioned, brings it really right back to, you know, once again, Bill Belichick and text messages, and it gets very deep in that. But it really comes down to a very not deep, you know, set of circumstances, which is just, are the best candidates being hired, number one, and are they being discriminated on because of their color?
Yeah. So, Mike, let's start with the involvement of the Dolphins. Now, again, this story just broke yesterday, so I haven't had a lot of time to dig into the particulars. But from what I understand, his claim against the Dolphins specifically is that they were trying to get him to lose games, which, you know, is not something unusual in and of itself for teams to sort of wink, wink, be a little bit tanking to get better draft picks. But for them to tell the guy they want him to lose and then fire him under the cover of, hey, you lost too much. I mean, it's something that sounds a little strange to me. How about you?
It's very strange. And you're talking about he's claiming that he was offered $100,000 to lose games. And it goes against everything, obviously, as a competitor and as a coach. You know, it was definitely a head scratcher as to why he was even fired in the first place down there, because he had the franchise going in the right direction, hadn't made the playoffs, but you're talking about you know, market improvement and from a standpoint, obviously, of just culture. So it was a head scratcher going from that moment. And as someone who is in the coaching world, and obviously not on that level, but when coaches are let go or for a myriad of circumstances, generally the rule of thumb is always keep it quiet. All right. You were let go for whatever reason. You decided to move on, whatever it is. You decided to part ways, or they made a change, and you'll go on to your next stop, and that's it. So it's almost as if there was something going on there. And then when these other things came up with interviews and not getting positions, I think, or at least it looks this way, that Coach Flores had enough and said, you know what, it's time to let it all fly.
Yeah, and what's strange about it too, well, we could dig into the part of this that pertains to the Broncos for just a minute. Supposedly, his claim against them involves John Elway either being hungover or out and out drunk during the actual interview process. So, I mean, I don't mean to poo-poo anything. I don't know that there's a lot there, but bigger picture, Mike, it seems like his suit against the NFL broadly may have some merit when you look at the sheer numbers. Now, we take a look at the NFL. About 70% of the players in the NFL are African American.
Yep.
And there is one head coach in the NFL, and it's Mike Tomlin. And Mike Tomlin has been there, and Mike Tomlin is basically going to be there because Mike Tomlin wins. But if we just stop for a moment and compare the NFL to, let's say, the NBA, which again is 70 to 75%, I believe, African American. But if you look at it in the NBA, they have somewhere around 13 to 14 African American head coaches, which is clearly a much better representative sample than the NFL does. So the NFL's record on this is poor, Mike.
It's poor, and there's no way to defend it. Yet the NFL came out immediately. I guess they lawyered up and said, 2 hours within the suit being filed, that there was no merit, and that they obviously, going forward, they looking to defend themselves. But in no way, shape, or form did they even open the door to say, you know what, we need to do better, or there's going to be an investigation of some sort. It was slam it right down, which in some ways is surprising, but also when you're talking about a mega $billion industry like the NFL is not, because it's about covering themselves and money and going forward. You bring up a great point. When you have 70% of the league's players at minimum African American, and there's one coach, just doesn't jive. What do we hear constantly over and over again? That you want a coach who relates to his players, and that just right there defeats any kind of argument that says, oh, well, what the NFL's doing, it's due diligence, and it's just, the way it's worked out and the best candidates. Absolutely not. I mean, you have to be naive or live under a rock to think that that's solid thinking. So in today's day and age, and once again, I'm going to repeat myself, but in a league where the onus is on being able to relate to players and your front office and the rest of your coaching staff and your facility and the people who serve the food, who better than a former player? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and if you look at also, Mike, the second chance aspect of it, right?
Yes.
Because Flores is a guy who had a 2-year stint with the Dolphins, and as you said, it seemed to be he was turning things in the right direction. It's not that you need to get a second chance immediately, but if you look at the number of African American head coaches, not coordinators or position coaches, head coaches who got that one chance and then were blown out the door and never got that second chance, that's concerning to me as well.
Absolutely. I mean, a name that comes to mind, Jim Caldwell. Now he's had a couple of different stops, but everywhere he's been, he's won or at least competed in markets that traditionally now are just losing type situations. So that if you're going to recycle some of these other guys, and someone as talented and skilled and has such a great resume as Jim Caldwell is not getting another look, it lends right to your point that something is wrong here.
Yeah. And I mean, people have tried to create this sort of parallel between Kaepernick and what he did and what Brian Flores is now doing. I don't really see that as much as, and I know I'm reaching back a long way for this, the parallel I'm really going to bring up, Mike, is Curt Flood.
Yeah.
Curt Flood was a good MLB player for a long time, and he decided in the late 60s he was not going to be traded from St. Louis to Philadelphia. He challenged the reserve clause, knowing that he was in essence committing professional suicide.
Absolutely.
And when the reserve clause was struck down in favor of free agency, Kurt Flood didn't benefit from that. Guys
No.
like Andy Messerschmidt and Catfish Hunter, and you could trace that lineage all the way forward to Max Scherzer, they're the ones who benefited from that. So Flores says he's doing this for the right reasons. I'm going to take him at his word, on that and just see as things unfold if the actual suits themselves have any merit. Because as you know better than I do, Mike, you have somebody that's very close to you that's in the legal profession. As Tom Cruise says in one of my favorite movies, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what I can prove.
Absolutely. Like in that movie, is there such a thing as a code red? No, there's not. Wink, wink. Again, we will, it's used when we want it to be used, but it's really not there. It's the dirty little secret. So yeah, in this scenario, does Brian Flores have text messages? Does he have a smoking gun, so to speak? Or is it that he said, you know what, we're going to just make a statement here. Enough's enough. And, he's going to be the spokesperson going forward for change. And is he, in essence, probably committing, as you said, career suicide? Unfortunately, yes. But if he's doing what he says he's doing, regardless of the outcome or regardless of hurt feelings or whatever else, you have to tip your cap to somebody who is willing to, at a young age, to step out and be that spokesperson with little to no guarantees, unless, once again, as I mentioned, there's something there. Doesn't quite seem that way. And based on some interviews that he gave today, and he's not going to tip their hand, of course, but a lot of hurt feelings, obviously. Are they going to be able to prove anything? I think ultimately no. But is it the impetus for change? I would say absolutely yes.
Yeah, and if he's not able to prove anything, then considering the fact that the NFL is coming off two tremendous weekends, Mike, not only in the quality of the games that we've all seen, but also in their viewership and the interest level of the public, does this put any type of, damper on that enthusiasm, especially among African-American fans and fans that are other minorities?
I would say it has to. The Super Bowl around the world is obviously the showcase event. So this is at this point going strong into that and as a lead-in. But I'm interested to see come Super Bowl Sunday now with this, as you saw a couple of years back with the NBA players making a statement, sitting out, taking a knee, for games themselves. Will the African-American players or even their teammates make some type of statement prior to the Super Bowl, at the Super Bowl, to show solidarity for this? Or is it something that is kind of a speed bump? I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. But as you mentioned, these last couple of weeks have been just, the best that the NFL could have asked for in terms of interest, like you said, in viewership. So this next week will tell quite a bit.
Yeah, our buddy Chris comments us. He brings up Eric Bieniemy, who's a guy that a lot of people for a long time now, Mike, have felt should get a look and should get some consideration for head coach. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, and everything you hear about him is that he's a great interview, and he is somewhat held back by his circumstance in terms of having to interview on a deeper level later because his teams are always going farther. But a name like that keeps coming up, and at least the word on the street is that he's a great interview. It does make you scratch your head once again. The Rooney Rule that was instituted years ago is obviously outdated and needs tweaking, and was certainly good in its it's an initial stance, but it certainly has now needed to be tweaked and moved on. One thing I will mention that just quickly with Brian Flores, and I know we're going to get into it with Declan. Take the Giants part of it out, though. The Giants interviewed other African-American candidates. So the timeline for me is a little fuzzy with that. Leslie Frazier, another in-house candidate. So I'm not quite sure where he's going to be going with that with the Giants. You can kind of see it, but there's a lot of nebulous things there. But no matter what happens, you just hope that a guy like Flores somewhere down the road gets another shot if he's deserving, and it certainly seems that way, regardless of the fact that he took a stand here and said, you know what, something's got to give.
Yeah, so you and I, up until yesterday, we're expecting to come on, talk a lot about the new hires for the Giants, the new general manager, the new coach. On the line with us right now is our Giants reporter, Declan Krogman. Let's bring him on, and let's start with a couple of the new hires that Mike and I, and I'm sure you, Declan, are excited about. How are you, buddy?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. Always happy to be back.
Welcome back, Declan.
So let's start with Joe Schoen, Declan. What was your impression of the hiring of Schoen, and then after that, the subsequent hiring of Dable?
Yeah, I was happy with the hire of Schoen. I think he's a good general manager with a lot of good experience in the Bills front office, so I really like that one as a whole. And I like the Dable hire as well. I had more of an issue with the Dable hire than I did with the Schoen one, just because ironically, of course, now all the stuff has come out with Brian Flores, but Brian Flores was the guy I wanted. I wanted a guy with the least amount of potential to flop, and I just felt like he was a guy who we saw he should not have been fired in Miami. He took that team that was tanking for first overall pick that clearly, as we saw yesterday, the owner allegedly wanted them to lose even more. He took them to a winning season in the second and third year. So I wanted something different than just hiring coordinators. However, I thought Dable was the second best pick, and he was the best first-year head coach available on the market.
So I wanted to ask you, Declan, because we didn't have you on the last show, but you contacted me privately. You and I were going back and forth, and you made it clear that Flores was your preferred candidate. What was there specifically about Flores as a candidate for the Giants head coaching spot that you liked?
Well, first of all, we've seen Brian Flores take a team that was really worse off or really in the same boat as the Giants are right now. We've seen him take that team to above 500 in no time. He was there 3 years in Miami, and his year 2 and year 3, they were above 500 with a roster and a quarterback that, quite frankly, they shouldn't have been. And if you can get it done there, I would like to see him bring that similar formula to New York, because all we've had the past couple of years is just these coaches that they come in and they look overwhelmed. They don't have the locker room. They think they do, and it's just a complete mess. And I think Brian Flores was the safe hire that gave you the real confidence that, hey, I'm going to be here after 2 years, and we're going to win some games and get this thing turned in the right direction. So that's why I like Brian Flores. And he was one of the rare coaches that has experience coaching offense, defense, and special teams.
Declan, when they hired Joe Schoen as the GM, and the Mara family made it very clear that this was not a package deal. That there was no, candidate at the moment that was coming along with him. They were going to do a fair and equal vetting of all candidates and really spend some time with it. Now with some of the text messages going forth and from Belichick and all that's involved in that, are you still buying that this was a process that was going to be wide open, or was it that they said to Joe Schoen, you know what? Okay, we know who you want. We'll go through it, but again, wink, wink. It's your guy from the get-go. Do you believe that it was a fair shot, or that he was really, that Dable was earmarked as the coach from minute one?
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely the favorite the second that Schoen got the job. But the one thing that was made clear was that Schoen, Ryan Poles, and their third candidate that they had, the 3 general manager candidates, their finalists, they all had one thing in common, and that was that Brian Flores was on their short list. So while I do feel like could they have been trying to package together, hey, we got Schoen, now we know that we have 2 coordinators that are up for jobs in Buffalo, and Leslie Frazier, who, by the way, might have cost himself a job after how he handled the last 13 seconds of that game and the entirety of the divisional game against the Chiefs. but that's neither here nor there. I'm not sure. I really hope that they didn't do that whole package deal thing, because clearly this is a team that needs to vet their head coaches, given their mistaken hires. But I think it's pure speculation at this point. I'm sure next week we're going to have a lot more of a different story when it comes to Flores and everything that's been coming out. But I really hope that they went through the interview process and vetted their guys the way they should.
Yeah, it's what's strange, Declan, is that if Flores has a case against the Giants, I would think it's probably based on at least two things. Number one, the text message from Belichick to Flores congratulating him on getting the job, even though that message was meant for Dable, not Flores.
Right.
And the other thing, at Shane's press conference, and I think you and I talked about this off the air, he expressed the preference to hire a guy that had previous head coaching experience. They supposedly narrowed it down to two, and then he picked the guy that didn't have head coaching experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's baffling to me too, and that's just something where, as Giants fans, we want a general manager that has confidence and that you can trust. And Shane just seemed like that hire from day one. I really hope that we don't start to feel any type of, a question mark going forward. I don't think we will, but with the lawsuits and everything coming out and some of the stuff he has said, I've liked what I've heard. That is definitely a red flag, though, to say you want a guy with head coaching experience and then hire a guy who has none. I mean, listen, being a coordinator in this league, we've seen a lot of great coordinators flop at head coach, and I just don't want that for Dable.
Declan, with the kind of poll that was in the air over the Giants this year, and sweeping out, starting fresh, and getting a new GM and then a new coach, and as Giant fans, or at least interested here in the Giants, it felt like a great new day. And then all of a sudden, bam, here we go again with, it's almost like being a Met fan once again. But we won't go down that road, because that's
I was going to make that same point, Mike. I didn't want you to get mad at me.
No, Trez, you're 100%. But Declan, what I would say, my question to you is, so if you're Brian Dable and now, you have these other things, but it's your team, it's your room. What's the first thing, that you're going to say to this group when you get these guys together? Do you address the kind of elephant in the room, or do you go, you know what, we're just going full steam ahead?
I mean, I don't necessarily think that he's going to be talking about the Brian Flores situation with the team, because the players aren't getting sued. He's not getting sued. And it's really nobody that's on that 53-man roster, the 90-man roster, now that it's, we're looking at training camp, OTAs, and the preseason down the line. I don't address it at all. I don't think he will address it. I don't think he should either, just because it doesn't have anything to do with him. Whether he was hired, say, hypothetically speaking, say Flores wins the suit and they find out that Dable was hired under the wrong pretenses. That's not necessarily on Dable, because he's oblivious to everything that's going on from the higher ups and the management. I don't think it affects how he coaches his team, nor do I think it affects how he handles himself in press conferences and team meetings going forward. I just think that right now that could be an elephant that clouds over the organization, and more so, it clouds over the NFL.
Yeah, so Shane's first order of business, Declan, is that he's going to have to really turn those number 5 and number 7 picks that the Giants have in the first round into really solid players that can make impacts with the Giants right away. Where do you see the Giants' greatest area of need? And you don't have to be player specific, but what position would you like to see them go after with that number 5 and that number 7 pick?
In short, with the 2 first-round picks in the top 10, I'd like to see one of them be a lineman and another be a pass rusher. Because I think right now, if we've learned from any teams in the formula of winning football, is you got to be built in the trenches. Because if you're not built in the trenches, you're not built to win. And it sounds cliche, but it's really that simple. The Bengals are the only exception in what we're seeing is a team that's been getting it done with a bad offensive line. And that's because Joe Burrow gets the ball out of his hands in the top 5 of some in the NFL, statistically speaking. But I think that right now, Arthritis is pretty good. I would love if Evan Neal, the tackle from Alabama, fell to us. Charles Cross's name has come up as well here and there. I want a lineman that you could put on either in the guard position, because Lord knows Will Hernandez is a turnstile at this point, or somebody you could put on the right side to play right tackle on opposite ends of Andrew Thomas. And then I want a pass rusher, because you got to keep building the defense.
Declan, were you surprised at all that the Giants, or at least specifically the Maras, admitted to messing up their quarterback, that they've done everything possible to make it difficult for him? Which, you mentioned Joe Burrow. Could you imagine how we would feel to have a quarterback, or at least of that ilk at the moment? But it really shocked me that the family came out and said, you know what, we've done everything possible to mess this guy up. So it looks like all the eggs are at least in that basket for one more season. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I think what I thought of it is, I guess that it just proves that Mara wasn't zoning out on some of these games, because he's watching the same film that we're watching. And the fact of the matter is that you've had a guy who's had 4 offensive coordinators in 3 years. He's now going into his 4th year in the NFL, and he's now on his 3rd head coach. That's something that's inexcusable. You look at all these young guys that come up in bad systems, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold. They go through the same thing. They have their ups and downs, a few ups and then majority downs, and everyone thinks they're a bad quarterback. You look at it, it's perfect to connect the Buffalo aspect of it in here with all the hires that have gone on. But what the Bills did from the beginning in 2018 was they surrounded Josh Allen with an excellent coaching staff. And the proof's in the pudding, because the Giants are trying to poach all of them, and they can't even get some of them. So I just think that, really, I'm not surprised what Mara said, because anyone can see it with their own eyes. Listen, was Jones maybe not the pick at 6? Sure. Would it shock anybody if Gettleman got a pick wrong? I think it would shock anyone if he got a pick right. But he might not have been the pick at that spot, but at the same time, they have done absolutely nothing to help him succeed, because the offensive line has been terrible. And I mean bottom 5 in the league since 2013.
Let me get a quick Super Bowl prediction from you, Declan.
Ooh. All right. So the Super Bowl prediction is tough because, well, obviously it's tough. It is also a week and a half away. I would like to point that out. I'm just kidding. I will make the prediction, no problem. I think that the stars are going to align for Joe Burrow. And while the Rams logistically are the better football team, probably the most complete football team in the NFL, Joe Burrow has a lot. The way he plays, everything all together, the chip on his shoulder, the way he can get out of the pocket, even though he doesn't get out of the pocket like Allen and Mahomes in a power way, he's got a nice elusiveness, and he throws really well in the high-pressure situations. And I think that the Bengals are going to pull away and win this game by a field goal. I think we're going to be treated to a treat, an absolute gem of a game. Give me the Bengals 31-28.
Declan, terrific job as always. Great to have you on. We'll talk to you in probably a couple weeks. And, yeah, that's it.
Great job, Declan. Always good to have you back.
Have you back. Good stuff, guys. You guys doing a great job. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thanks
Be well,
again.
buddy.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this to talk some hockey with Johnny Sticks on Spot on Sports.
This is Tyler Davis, tight end for the Green Bay Packers, and you're listening to Spot on Sports.
Now back to Spot on Sports with Mike Trezor and Mike Godone.
Welcome back, everyone, to Spot on Sports. Mike Trezor, the coach Mike Godone, now joined by our hockey maven, Johnny Sticks. John Santa Maria. John, how are you this evening?
Great. Islanders hockey on in the background. Pretty much live updates as we go. Right now, I'll give you 7 minutes to go. First period 0-0 at UBS Arena. And it's the return of Jordan Eberle.
Ah, that's right. I forgot about that. The guy I was down on last year. So is Varlamov in goal for the Isles tonight, John?
Yes, it's the second game of a back-to-back. And remember, this game was supposed to be on Saturday, but because of the snowstorm, it was pushed back.
So 16-16 and 6 overtime losses, John. Big win last night. Goals from Barzal, from Beauvillier, from Wallstrom, Mike Godone's main man, Oliver Wallstrom. talk about how the Islanders have been playing lately. Last game tonight before the All-Star break.
Well, overall, I think we could all say the whole season's been very inconsistent, a lot of distraction, a lot going on. Starting to get back into their routine, starting to really find a group, but still you're seeing that inconsistent play from time to time. They go into this All-Star break. If they go in over 500, if they get the win, if they're able to get the win tonight in Seattle, I'm peeking in as we go through it. And we also have a treat tonight because Jiggs McDonald's doing the game for some of the old-time Islander fans. So great to hear Jiggs. He sounds and looks terrific.
Jiggs is an Islander institution as much as any player from those dynasty years. I'll tell you, Jiggs and Eddie. Many a night I listen to them, and Jiggs is a Hall of Famer in anybody's book. John, you mentioned a little bit of the inconsistency, but looking to get a win here going into the break. First time playing the Seattle Kraken, having them in town, which is yet another new thing for the building. We mentioned Matt Barzal also. You see him starting to kind of find his rhythm here as we go into the break. Anybody else who's standing out for you besides him that seems to have finally kind of found their stride here?
I think a lot of guys have started to really find their rhythm. Specifically him. I think Pajot's getting comfortable now with the more consistent schedule. I think that threw a lot of guys off. Zach Parise has played better. I mean, we don't expect a lot from him. He's 38 years old, but still playing on that line with Pajot and Wallstrom, they've certainly looked good at times. Fourth line's doing what they do. Getting Pulak back now off IR certainly is going to help. You saw what Robin Salo could do. And one thing that I have said from the start of the season, the day they brought Zdeno Chara back, I said maybe he's here to help because they have a cap situation. But he's not here and asked to do a lot. Maybe he could sort of start going into that role now where he could just, all right, maybe get some mock minutes, as you like to fill in, maybe help on a back-to-back. Give Robin Salo the time. He played very well in the absence of Pulak. You don't want to see him forgotten. He's on the taxi squad right now. And I understand that's for purposes of calling up, calling down, whatever. But give him the time. I wouldn't devote, especially second half of the season. Try not to, especially with all the back-to-backs coming. Don't devote every single minute to Chara. See what you got with the young guys. And maybe if this turns out to go in not the direction we were all hoping in, you get a good chance to really look at the youth of the team and kind of figure out how you're going to not necessarily rebuild, but retool to get back to the playoffs next year if it's not meant now.
Barry Trotz was asked last night, John, about the goaltending situation, obviously with so many back-to-backs and games, just alternating back and forth. Mentioned that he would like to go with the hotter hand and stay a little bit more consistent once we get to the second half. You think that that's plausible with the schedule as it is? Or has one of these goaltenders, really stepped up and said, you know what, take age, take contract situation, anything, take it out. Is it time to really just establish, the young guy here, or do we continue to go back to back and see who steps up?
Well, there's a couple ways you could go about it. Yes, there is a lot of games all gapped up together. A lot of travel in the month of February because they have the Western Canada trip and the California trip and all the makeups. Luckily, it's not all grouped together. You have a couple of home games mixed in. Things are spread out because of the time they got off in between the Olympics if they were going to go, which they're not going now. Varlamov's in net tonight. I'm okay with that going into the All-Star break, but I think they have to ride Ilya Sorokin as much as possible. And then if he starts to take a slip, you know what you have with Varlamov. He just hasn't played well right now. And maybe watching a little bit more will help. I don't know. It could, but it's just, I feel like if you need a big save, you need a couple of big plays from your goaltender. He's not giving it to you right now. And maybe it's just time to take another look. I also wouldn't, and I'm going to be crystal clear honest with both of you on this. I would not be surprised if Varlamov is dealt come the trading deadline. Oh. 2 reasons. They might be ready to give number 1 to Sorokin. You could bring Corey Schneider up and be a backup. And 2, he only has 1 more year on his contract. You might be able to get a first-round pick for him. And that's something, if I'm Lou Lamoriello, I'm entertaining. Because there are some desperate teams out there who might need him more than the Islanders do right now.
That's a great point, John. Yeah, there was a little rumblings of that recently in the paper, and great point. There are some teams that need that type of goaltender, and listen, Sorokin was brought in to be the number one. I think you would agree on that as well. And if you need to shake things up a little bit and hand the reins over to him, now is the time. Schneider is definitely a capable backup. A couple of games here or there. They've kept him around for a reason. Yep. I would think. So I think that lends itself to your point. I would assume, yes.
Yeah, well, I would think too. As far as Schneider, one, he had a lot of injury trouble in New Jersey, and they did him a favor putting him on the taxi squad last year. Now he's down in Bridgeport, so I think he's really gotten his game back. So I don't see any reason why he can't be a capable backup come whether it's this year or next year. And the other thing too, with Varlamov's contract, you could free up $5 million in cap space to put towards other guys on the team because Schneider's only going to require the league minimum at this point in his career.
John, one last question for you about Mike had mentioned Oliver Wahlstrom. Seems that no matter what he does, he's not getting out of the somewhat doghouse of Barry Trotz. He plays well, but yet Trotz is still pointing out things that he's not happy with. Is that part of motivation, or are there some real gaps in this guy's game?
No, I would think that's definitely part of motivation. I think what Barry Trotz is trying to say, play consistent if you want to earn your spot, especially when you have other guys like Kiefer Bellows and Austin Zarnik, who's had a few good games. You want to go with the hot hands. And what the message I'm trying to take from that is, you want to keep your spot in the front nine, you got to play like you're a front nine player every single night.
So the Rangers, we have to unfortunately we have other.
It's more of a surprise if you want.
Well, yeah, I kept thinking, for a couple of weeks now to ask you, is this team for real? But obviously they are for real.
They are for real. I think this is a threat in the regular season. Obviously, we've seen the playoffs turn a whole nother set of ways. There's a lot of teams. I'm looking at the standings as we speak right now, reading through the Metropolitan. Listen to these records. Carolina's 31-9-2. The Rangers are 30-13-4. Pittsburgh's 27-11-8. Washington's 25-12-9. You're going to have two of those teams possibly out after one round. That is remarkable. And the Atlantic is no picnic either. Florida, Tampa Bay each have 30 wins. Toronto has 29, and Boston's at 26. And you could say, well, how the Islanders going to catch up for that? We'll get a good look at where the month of February. I think you'll get a better idea by the end of February where the Islanders stand, if they're going to be a real player in this, or if it's just going to be, hey, let's win the rest of the year and see what happens. But there's some good teams in this Eastern Conference.
Yeah, John, Mike stole a little bit of my thunder. I want to ask you about the Rangers, and similar to him, I've been keeping an eye on them and sort of waiting for them to stumble a little bit. Let me put you in the prediction business for a little while. Do you see some bumps in the road coming in the foreseeable future for the Rangers, or do you think that they're going to be able to lock up that number 1, number 2 seed come playoff?
Well, I would think that every team has a couple of bumps in the road. It's just a matter of they're still a very young team when you look at it. I mean, Igor Shesterkin's never played playoff hockey, and I'm not counting the 3 games in Toronto when they went up to the bubble that they lost to Carolina in that best of 3. I'm not really going to count that one because they sort of backed their way into that through the nature of the NHL, but a lot could still happen. And one thing too, I had this discussion with some buddies at work, and while everybody's happy with the play and all, we're kind of comparing this to also like the Knicks too in some ways as far as with leadership, because look at Gerard Gallant, their head coach's track record. He doesn't last anywhere more than 3 years. And I think the fear of the Ranger fan is it's good now, but he's going to wear out his welcome just like he did in Vegas. We all know he did, and just like he did in Florida. I will say, though, with what happened in Florida, I feel like there was some other issues up top with the front office. I clearly think he wore his welcome out in Vegas, and we know who runs the Rangers. We know what's been seen with the basketball team in that building. Can't you just see Gerard Gallant saying the wrong thing to James Dolan and getting his pink slip the same way David Quinn did and the same way John Davidson did last spring?
Yeah, I wanted to just broaden out the picture with you just for a moment, John, and talk to ask you about the NHL, in general. Now, obviously, right before the last time you came on with us, the decision was made not to send NHL players to the Olympics. I think we can all pretty much agree good decision, especially the way this season has unfolded. But this coming week, the All-Star break, do you think even that is a good idea this year, considering everything that's gone on?
Let's backtrack first to the Olympics. There were too many games to be made up. So that's something that had to be done. And God forbid if anybody got into quarantine, you would have had to stay in Beijing for like 2 weeks. And Barry Trotz, for you guys, I don't know if you guys know this. I think he has a son who with disability, something like that, special needs or whatever. So I think the last thing he needed was a serious exposure to COVID. He was already out on protocol a couple of weeks ago. So, no, I think it was for the safety of everybody, their families, the kids. But for those who were around to see The Miracle on Ice, and I just actually watched that movie, speaking of that, as I always do before the Olympics, I think it's exciting for older hockey fans to watch the college kids showcase themselves. And they are coached by David Quinn, the ex-Ranger head coach. So maybe he will be the one to bring gold home.
What about the All-Star break, John?
I don't think they were going to go a couple of years without that one happening. Luckily, of the concerns, most of the guys are in the U.S. I think there's a few guys you got to worry about with Canada. Each team only has like 1 or 2 representatives, so there's maybe at most, let's say, 10 players coming from Canada. The 7 teams throw a couple of guys extra who got guys, so let's say 10 guys. I mean, they're going to take the chance. They're not going to lose the money on that. I think that was more of a financial decision, especially with 2 new television partners in the mix this year in ESPN and TNT.
John, just to kind of wrap it up with the Islanders here going forward, I know you said towards the end of this month is going to really tell the tale. I think all the games in hand that the Islanders have accumulated due to the reschedules and everything are really going to play the biggest role here, and will tell the tale with those 2 trips. So I would agree with you. We're going to know pretty quickly. If it becomes a season where the playoffs are not really in the cards, do the Islanders sell off any pieces, or do they stand pat and say, oh, you know what, it just wasn't our year, other than the goaltending scenario, and let's just get ready for next season?
Well, I think they will certainly entertain the idea of selling. Like I said, Varlamov, I think they'll do it either way. I think. And I mean, looking at it tonight with Jordan Eberle back, I think the Cal Clutterbuck decision has to be a factor. I think that will be a very difficult one for Lula. He's been here a long time.
Yeah.
And that would be very tough, I think, to move up from but he is up there in age too, and his contract's up. I don't know if they're going to want to grant him another one going forward. There's going to be some decisions to make. There's a few guys you could ask. Maybe somebody may want Chara for a late round pick. Somebody could ask for Zach Parise. You don't know, but I think it's something you could certainly entertain, because even on the Cal Clutterbuck front, if you could get something for these guys and they're going to walk anyway, you might as well accumulate some extra draft picks.
Yeah, my buddy Steve. Sorry, Mike, didn't mean to sit on you there, but my buddy Steve from Florida and from back in the day, mentioning that the Islanders just having a hard time scoring goals. That just seems to be kind of the thing over and over again each year. But Steve, we're going to do our best up here in New York to try to get some more pucks in the net.
And Steve, I'll add one thing to that, and that's what I'm saying with the cap space. So if they could clear Varlamov for next year, they could clear a couple of guys. They might be able to finally go get that big-time goal scorer. And I know they built this team defensive front, but now if maybe you clear a couple of salaries, you have a couple of guys like a Salo you're going to give some top 6 minutes to, and maybe some guys on cheaper rates, you can go get that score, as the cap will hopefully go up this year.
Any score yet, John?
No score at the end of the first period.
Speaking of no goals.
So we're going to let you jump off and watch the game. Great speaking with you. Thanks a lot. Great job as always. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks, John.
Thank you for having me. Let me give you one Super Bowl pick real quick, because I heard Declan.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to say the Rams easily.
Okay.
All right. Great.
Easily. I like the Rams. They're due. Matthew Stafford, one of the good guys in the NFL, deserves a Super Bowl.
Appreciate it, John.
Thanks, Johnny.
All right, Mike. So, we didn't have a chance at the beginning. Usually we do what's happened already and then what's going to happen next. But again,
breaking news.
Yeah, we would not have been doing our due diligence. We would have been remiss if we didn't cover the Flores story. But I have to tell you, coming off last weekend and the one before, we've just been treated to some great football, not just the AFC and NFC championship game, which were both terrific games. But I mean, do you realize, Mike, out of the last 6 NFL playoff games, the only one that's been decided by 6 points or more was that insane Kansas City Buffalo game.
Exactly. And that's what is making the casual fan, even before the Super Bowl, get excited. And I can tell you this, the casual fan in my household, which is my wife, was literally talking to me about field goals and asking me about hash marks. And it was unbelievable. It was wonderful. And I said, wow, you know what, if the Giants can get better, before you know it, she's going to be asking me to go to a game. So yes, that is exactly right. These games have been unbelievable. Certainly the Super Bowl is lining up to be right along those lines. Let's hope it's not a dud. But you have, two explosive offenses there, at least. They can put a lot of points on the board. But yes, these championship games and the playoffs just in general with the extra game, even though some of those teams didn't belong there, and now the extra week, there's just more football than anybody could ever ask for.
Yeah, it's funny because after that first round, we were bemoaning the lack of really good competitive games. And then, as I said, that second weekend, I mean, Bengals 19-16 over the Titans. You had that one. 49ers 13-10 over Green Bay. Nobody had that one.
I whiffed big time on that one. If you want to, if you roll the videotape on that. I
mean, the Rams, we were both interested in them upsetting Tampa, which they did. Yes. And then you told me that the Bills would beat the Chiefs, and they almost did. If you ended that game 13 seconds earlier, they would have. So all of those 4 games, Mike, and especially that Buffalo Chiefs game. I mean, I have to tell you, every person from the casual to the rabid fan agreed that game was absolutely insane. Just the amount of scoring in the last 2 minutes of the game.
Yeah, an absolute instant classic, as they used to say on ESPN, and it just it goes right to that. And then for Kansas City to not follow up, because you would, I think everybody would have agreed that Buffalo and Kansas City were even just before that game, really were the top dogs in the AFC. And for them not to follow through and lose the way they did after winning the coin flip, and Mahomes throws the interception, and then they come right down and kick the field. It really was highest drama and Hollywood endings. So we go to Hollywood now. We go back out to Los Angeles, and for the second year in a row, after so many years, we have a home team playing. Now, based on the red shirts that were in that stadium for the championship game, and we know that the Super Bowl is very corporate and whatever else. But you have to give some credence to the fact that there is a team playing in their home stadium, no matter who's in the stands, and just the comfort level. So, what do you think? Before we ask you for a prediction, what are you thinking about? Is that something? Would you agree with me that is definitely something that is going to play a role here?
Yeah, I think it will. It's not going to play as big a role as it did with Tampa. Now, right. First of all, to be fair about it, I said last year when the Buccaneers got the chance to play, I didn't like it. And I still don't like it, even though it's the Rams and their home field advantage is not going to be and isn't and hasn't been what the Buccaneers is. I don't like it. I don't like it this year. But what I thought was really interesting, Mike, if we could just back up to this past weekend, what I thought was interesting was that both the AFC and NFC championship games followed kind of the same script, right? I mean, KC was up early big time. And while San Francisco wasn't up big time, they were up in that game. And then both the Rams as well as the Bengals came back. Similar to what we said about the Rangers, I think that everybody is waiting for that other shoe to drop with the Bengals and for them to be sort of out of their weight class, in with too big a puncher to really stay in the fight. And it just hasn't happened yet.
No, you're 100% correct. And as my friend Steve mentions, again, you got to be happy for Bengals fans. On the way home tonight, I had my ear on another program on Sirius Satellite with the Marquis. I'm sure you remember him asking some questions, and I'll throw this one out to you, to Trez. How many straight years has it been losing seasons for the Cincinnati Bengals before this year? Do you know?
Wow, maybe Michael Anthony can give me some Jeopardy music here.
Oh, don't
let's
overthink
see.
it too much.
How many straight
Straight
seasons
losing seasons.
has it been for the Bengals prior to this year?
Prior to
I'm
this year.
going to say 12.
Okay, big number, which I was in that double digit range as well. It's only been 5.
Wow.
Yes, only been 5, but they were so putrid before that. That's why. But
Okay.
when you look at a team 5 straight losing seasons and then get to the big game, you're right. You can't help but think that the Cinderella, slipper is not going to fit. But when they are winning games, when your quarterback is getting sacked as much as they are, and looked completely lost in the first half against Kansas City and come back. I kind of had that same feeling, Mike, when we get to prediction time. I'll tell you that. But yet, what a great feeling for the NFL and for us Giant fans. And if you're a Jet fan or any, that you can say, you know what, in a real short amount of time, if you draft well, get the right coach, you can get into not just being in the mix again, but you can be a major player.
But Mike, I always like to put you in this uncomfortable position
of let's go.
Criticizing other coaches. All right. So I'm going to ask you right now, were there any mistakes made by either Andy Reid or by Shanahan that you took with you coming away from either that AFC or NFC championship game?
I'll start with the latter. With Kyle Shanahan, I don't believe so. I thought he coached a pretty good game. There was nothing to me that was jumping out there. The fact that Jimmy Garoppolo didn't throw he's good for at least one head scratcher plus per game. I thought he was reined in pretty well. And they followed the game plan to a T. I would say this with Andy Reid. Now, I don't know if it was his decision or Patrick Mahomes, but you could just tell at the end of the half when they ran out of time and didn't at least put 3 points up on the board, you said, wow, you know what? This is something that could come back to bite them. And boy, did it ever. So Mahomes put it on himself, which I give him a lot of credit for. But you know what? He has 48 million reasons to be able to get over it this weekend. But he took the credit. But yeah, that to me was really, you can't at the end of any half, but especially a championship game, you cannot leave points off the board. And Steve, once again, and our friend Chris says, take the Cardinals next year with the Super Bowl being in Arizona. But yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to save up for that, Chris.
It's going to be the new trend. Everybody's going to play it in their stadium.
And that's what, we got to try to get it back at MetLife. Although that was an interesting one a couple of years back. But yeah, Andy Reid, I think him, Bieniemy, whoever, really poor clock management, and why they called that play there, I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm gonna give Shanahan a little bit more of a pass than I'm going to give Andy. And there were a lot of people who came back after the end of that game and second-guessed Andy. I said it right at the time, Mike. I texted my brother at that moment, and I said, Andy got greedy there. He should have gone for the 3. And he said, well, listen, you're up 21-3, blah, 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 blah. No. He should have gone. No, actually, it was 21-10 at the time. But He should have still gone for the field goal. It was almost, in a way, Mike, some sort of almost like arrogance that we can score anytime. And you're going to throw it into the flat for Tyreek Hill and not even into the end zone. It didn't make any sense to me. And I agree with you. I thought it definitely had a detrimental carryover to the second half for the Chiefs.
Yeah, if anything, Mike, right, what are you doing? Just throw a quick slant into the end zone, 3 seconds, boom, you had 5 or 6 on the clock, and then you come out and kick the field goal. Yeah, other than just a straight run, one of the most surprising things I've seen since Seattle decided to try to throw the ball in the end zone a couple of years ago.
All right, so let's get into it. Let's get into a Super Bowl prediction.
All right.
I'll let you go first, Mike.
Okay. Well, I have been known on occasion to pull out some odd jerseys. I had the Chicago Bears up a couple of weeks ago.
Not Boomer. Is it Boomer?
No. All right. So here we go. We have a classic St. Louis Kurt Warner Rams jersey from back in the day. So I'm gonna go with my Rams. I think it will be a classic. I think it will be a 3-point game once again. I'm going 38-35 Los Angeles Rams. A shootout. An absolute OK Corral shootout, and it will be a 3-point game once again. Now, if it turns out to be 9-6, and I can say it was a 3-point game, at least I can hang my hat on that a little bit. But I'm going with the Rams. You have a close game either way, Mike, or are you going with a blowout? What do you got?
No, I'm going with a close game because you know what? Like I said, the last 6 games have all been close. I mean, only one of them's been decided by 6 or more points. Every single other game has been decided by a field goal. And so I'm going to go with a very, very close game. You know how much I love to disagree with you, Mike, and I love to go against you. But in this case, I didn't learn my lesson with Cincy when you told me that they were going to beat the Titans. I didn't think they were going to beat. They were going to win the game last week, and I still don't think that they're going to win. And I am going to go on the same side as you. I'm going to pick the Rams, and I'm going to make it even closer than you. I'm going to say 24-23 final.
Wow. Okay.
Last second field goal.
This proves to everybody that we don't sit before these shows and say, hey, let's make sure that we pick different teams, because I know that makes for better theater and better radio. But we've got a couple of comments. If there's anybody out there who would like to pick the Bengals, please put it in the comments right now so that when we come back on in 2 weeks, we can give you full credit, extend it right out there. But yeah, we're just hoping for a great game as well. Would it be terrible to see the Bengals? No, of course not. Although the cigar action that our friend Joe Shiesty, I think is they're calling him right now, can't be Joe Cool, because that was Joe Montana. But listen, the kid's a player, but I'm not ready for the cigar thing just yet. Maybe in another year or two. We got Cooper Kupp MVP. Completely possible, Steve.
Absolutely. I said that a couple weeks ago. Is Cooper Kupp not the best receiver in football? For my money right now, Mike Cadone, he is.
He is. And gives up his body, blocks. I mean, and you know what? What's even better? Keeps his mouth quiet.
Exactly.
The only thing that I was a little bit somewhat worried about with these 2 weeks, kind of like Groundhog Day, where you have to have 6 more weeks of winter. It was 2 more weeks of Odell Beckham Jr. We'll see when media day comes. Thankfully, he has not dropped too many bombs yet. But listen, as Giant fans, we know he's capable of hugging the net, doing all sorts of things to be all about Odell Beckham Jr. But got to give the guy credit. He's caught balls and taken some pressure off Kupp and done what he said he was going to do.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for us from here at Spot on Sports. We want to thank Declan for coming on the phone with us. Want to thank Johnny Sticks for coming on, talking some hockey with us. Our producer engineer is the great Michael Anthony. Our theme music, Spot On, is by Mr. Scott Daly. Our logo art is by Valerie Hanatic, the Jets fanatic. Our voiceover guys, the amazing Archie Snowden. For everyone here at Spot on Sports, including the coach, Mike Cadone, this is Mike Treza saying we'll see you next time on Spot on Sports.
Whatever it takes.